Welcome to our reflections on the book of Revelation, and I want to finish our reflections on chapter 12, and I'll read a little bit again for you that I want to pick up in verse 14. We're told that as soon as the devil found himself thrown down to the earth, he sprang in pursuit of the woman, the mother of the male child, and she was given a huge pair of eagle's wings to fly away from the serpent into the desert, into a place where she could be for 3.5 years. And then the serpent vomited water from his mouth like a river after the woman to try and sweep her away. In my last session, I ended up with telling us all that our choice for the woman church is to go the way of Eve and fall under the power of the dragon, or go the way of Mary and take the wings of the eagle and fly into the desert. And this is because the choice for the woman church in the second half of the book of Revelation is to be the glorious woman of chapter 12, or to reduce herself to the terrible harlot of chapter 17. You cannot be the harlot of Babylon and the bride of the Lamb. It's not possible. The bride of the Lamb won't even show herself until the harlot is actually dealt with. Okay, so I want to pick up on the flight of the church, which is spoken about here in chapter 14. If we look at the fact that the people of Israel, the woman Israel, after the disastrous experiences in Egypt, she was brought through the flood waters of the Red Sea and to a place of safety in the wilderness. So notice the Exodus theme is continuing. And the Lord said to woman Israel in Exodus 19:4, I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So the whole point about the woman being given eagle's wings is actually terribly important. So I just want to read for you a piece from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 28 to 31. The Lord is an everlasting God. He created the heavens and the earth. He does not grow tired or weary. His understanding is beyond fathoming. He gives strength to the wearied. He strengthens the powerless. Young men may grow tired and weary, youths may stumble, but those who wait and hope upon the Lord will renew their strength. They shall put out wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and never tire. So notice that putting your hope in the Lord and putting out your wings of the eagle go together. I think the two wings of the eagle are surrender to the Lord and trust in the Lord. We have to trust the Lord beyond reason, because God himself is the great eagle and he will carry us through the disastrous times that are to come. In John's day, that is the first Christian century, we have the woman church had to flee from Palestine because she was being persecuted by the Sanhedrin. And when she tried to settle in the Roman Empire, when she got to Rome, she had to flee the authorities in Rome. Unfortunately, there was nowhere to go except underground in the catacombs. But she also fled literally into the desert, as I've told you before, because we have all this wonderful witness of the desert fathers, okay? And what John is saying is that our safety is in living a personal, intimate relationship of union with Jesus. That's where our safety is. And the great eagle will carry us on his wings and take us to a safe place. The 42 months, of course, reminds us of the 42 stages of the journey of woman Israel through the desert to reach the promised land as well. Now, for the woman church, the promised land has a twofold significance. One is the new heavens and the new earth that we will find in chapters 21 and 22. And then the second one is our final home in heaven itself, when we've arrived at our destiny. So because the martyrs survived and reached heaven, and the desert fathers went out literally into the desert, the church survived in spite of the fact that there were millions of martyrs for the early church. Now, it's going to be the same at the end of time. I shouldn't say the end of time, the end times that we're living in the 21st century. Believers won't have to go underground literally, but they will have to separate themselves from the world, and they will have to separate themselves from the whole business of the Antichrist, and they will have to live very deep prayer lives with God, and they will have safety in that. They will be able to survive. Now, in verse 15, we're told that Satan let a flood against the woman to try and engulf her. Now, you do know from the beginning, and I've been explaining it to you all the time, is that John is using symbols the whole time. And so the flood is not necessarily physical water, okay? If it was physical water, then the text would be rather simple. But if you go into the scriptures, the Old Testament we call it, we find that Pharaoh tried to engulf the Hebrews at the time of the Exodus, even throwing the boy children into the river. We find at a much later time that Antiochus IV Epiphanes tried to engulf the Jewish people just before at the time of Christ and the Incarnation. And now we find in the 1st century that the Roman Empire tried to engulf the infant church. And so the engulfing, the image is flood. Okay. Isaiah chapter 8 verses 7 to 8 infers that the word flood can also be an invading army. Let's look at that for a moment. In Isaiah 8 verses 7 to 8, he is speaking and he says, because this people have refused the waters of Shalom, that is the good gifts the Lord has given to them, the Lord will bring up against you the mighty and deep waters of the river, that is the king of Assyria. In other words, and it will overflow out of its bed, bursting all its banks and inundate Judah, and so on. That means that the flood meant an invading army coming in and engulfing you. So the flood doesn't necessarily mean a tsunami or anything like that. But if you look at the end times, the 20th century, for example, we've been flooded with atheistic materialism. It has engulfed society today. We have had a flood of filth thrown at us in the 21st century. We have modernism, liberalism, rationalism, naturalism, and everything that is against spirituality and against the spirit. That's all a flood of filth, a flood that will want to engulf us and absolutely destroy us. So it means that Satan just finds this way and that way and the other way and the other way to try and get us when we managed to reject him on some other previous thing. So the Lord will protect his people from all of this stuff if they stay in union with him. But we're told in verse 15 that the earth came to the rescue of the woman, which is rather interesting. Now, the earth usually means the unbelieving world out there. But if you actually go back into the scriptures, and this is where sometimes John's images can get confusing, you find that in Numbers 26, the earth physically swallowed up Korah and his clan because of their rebellion against God. And you're told in Deuteronomy 11 that the earth swallowed up Dathan and Abiram for their rebellion against God as well. And so it means that the earth, meaning the unbelieving Roman Empire, wanted to swallow up the church, absolutely destroy it. So we have to be careful when we're looking at the images. Okay. Now the final thing in chapter 12 is very interesting. Then the dragon was enraged with the woman and went away to make war on the rest of her children. That means each individual person. Nobody is free. Nobody escapes. If you are a disciple of Christ, if you are committed to him, if you have allowed yourself to be confirmed in the church, then you're a target for Satan. It's as simple as that. The dragon was enraged with the woman, that's the woman church, and went away to make war on the rest of her children. why is there a differentiation between woman, church, and the individuals? That's very interesting, because Jesus said that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. But unfortunately, the gates of hell can prevail against the unfaithful, against the unwary, and against the uncommitted. We're going to see this again as we go on in chapters 13 and 14. So Satan's war is to prevent the individual from serving God. So he'll try and terrify you. He'll try and make you anxious about this and that and the other. He'll try and bring you down because of your own weaknesses and sinfulness. And this is where we have this glorious thing in the church, that we have the Tribunal of Mercy, that we can throw ourselves at the feet of the Lord and say to him, I have sinned, and receive his incredible, inexplicable, incredible forgiveness. And it's always, as soon as we just throw ourselves at his feet, he does that. And so we realize that the battle of Satan is against the church as a whole, but against each individual as well. And so each individual has got to take up the armour of the Lord in Ephesians 6. I've told you this before. And we must fight this battle, and we must fight it bravely, because when the beast of the USSR in the 20th century came down, it came down because the little people in the USSR stood up one by one by one by one against that terrible beast, and they gave their lives in their millions, and that beast came down. We've seen that, we've witnessed it in our own lifetimes, so we know how to deal with the beast. Don't be afraid. Romans 8:31 tells us that if God is on your side, who can be against you? Just make sure you're on God's side. Thank you for listening. Shalom agus banach day live. Goodbye. God bless you.
Are you searching for answers? Discover your true identity. Stay tuned to Shalom World.